Bruce, thanks so much for making time today. We got you away from the beach out there in Charleston, but excited to tell your SMU story and what you're building. But for those who don't know you yet, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitch. It's great to join you today, and thank you for the invitation to join. Yeah, summer has arrived here in Charleston. We've started to get like our first kind of high 80s day, and the humidity finally got here. So it's warm, and the tourists are here. So it feels like summer. Memorial Day is, just around the corner. I'm class of 2013. My name's Bruce Blackwood. I uh, started up at SMU sort of from 2009 to 2013, just to kind of give a scope of when I was on campus. Had such a great experience. So it's been great to, catch up with the 1911 group members, kind of get more involved there and meet some of my classmates I hadn't been in contact with for some years. And then, broadening my scope of network. Since we're here in Charleston, we have a good bit of SMU people kind of from my vintage years to, previous ones, but always looking forward to meeting new SMU folks and seeing how in the Carolinas and Georgia we can work together where I spent a lot of my time. And then I'm in Dallas a few times a year. So look forward to doing more of your events.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of already hit the dream here. 12 or 13 years out of school, business owner in Charleston. I mean, that's how we all want to write our careers. But before we can tell that story, let's jump back to kind of the start. You went to a well-known boarding school, Macaulay, grew up in Atlanta and kind of the Georgia area. Tell us a little bit about the origin story to SMU. How'd you hear about it, and how'd you ultimately select it as the place for your 4 years of undergrad?
Oh man. I mean, to start from the beginning, yeah, I was born in Atlanta, lived there until I was about 6 years old. And then my father died. So we moved out closer to where my grandparents were in Monroe, Georgia, which is just about 30 minutes from the University of Georgia campus. I was there. My father was an attorney in Atlanta. So we were part of, like the greater Buckhead community, which was a
Hmm.
fantastic one I'm still well connected with today. But that really brought us, sort of out into the country, small 9,000 person town. And that was closer to like our family businesses and just being closer to family generally. So starting at with those roots, it kind of made me a lot more, part of like the broader kind of like Athens, Atlanta
Hmm.
community. So that's always been one that's sort of drawn me. Deciding to go to boarding school was one where you're in a smaller town. You can either drive to Athens, which is, 30 or 40-minute drive, which early in the morning when it's dark out and you've got deer on the road. I rode the bus at Athens Christian School for a while in elementary school, and then I was going to the George Walton Academy in Monroe, which was closer. But there was sort of a tradition there to go to like the Episcopals,
Right.
Baylor, Macaulay. So I toured the Chattanooga schools, which were driving distance, about 3 hours away. And my mother actually died when I was 11. So
Mm.
after her passing, I was living with my grandparents who were both in their 70s at the time and really molded me from, 11 till the point I decided to go to school, which was part of like, I was in this position where education was important. I kind of felt the weight that I needed to do something to help my profile of education, networking, like, being in a small town and having a dad who had accomplished a lot, a
Yeah.
mother who was really accomplished. They both went to the University of Georgia, but like understanding I might need to do something else to do that. So that was sort of where I was as a 15-year-old and ended up at Macaulay for all 4 years of high school. And really there, I mean, one, it's an all boys school, so you want to find like a university with girls, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's priority number one, in terms of like, if you want good motivation to get out of high school, go to an all boys school because you're like, well, college is going to be so much more fun than this.
Exactly.
The education is great. The focus on academics was fantastic, because, it's not co-ed.
Yeah.
But some of my best friends are all from Macaulay and they're from the Southeast or,
Mhm.
broader than that. But coming to SMU was great because there was about four of us from Macaulay that were our class. There was a couple the
Okay.
year before, a couple the year after. We connected well with like the Woodbury Forest guys, the
Mhm.
Episcopal folks. And, it just kind of was a cool molding because everyone that went to like these 4 or 5 boarding schools in the Southeast, like Baylor and all these that was
Yeah.
mentioned, we all just kind of felt like we had this experience, right?
Yeah.
So we always kind of connect well. We know a few of the same people. We probably toured each other's schools when we were freshmen
Right.
and sophomores and then made that decision. But coming to SMU was just one where I felt like the transition was easy in some ways, but harder in other ways because man, the distractions in Dallas are everywhere. You're
Yeah.
meeting people all the time. Being in Bo's dorm in 2009 as a freshman in a co-ed dorm, going from 4 years in Chattanooga, Tennessee, it was exciting, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
to actually focus on the academics and try and make grades while also you have all of the excitement of going being a freshman and football
Mhm.
season. It's a lot to handle, and I'm sure you had to deal with a lot of that
Yeah.
too.
No, and so, well, I remember my time there. I think I mentioned a handful of Macaulay kids, and I was a boarding school kid, and it was fun going to SMU because you had the Northeast boarding school kids, you had us from the South in boarding school. Was SMU on Macaulay's kind of college counselor radar? Were you guys kind of the main first four to do it, or had there been a track record where a lot of uh, guys from your school had found SMU and kind of how did it get on the map? Maybe then after you guys, did you guys kind of create a pipeline there?
Yeah, I think so. I think we were one of the years where it was a really hard year to get into the University of Georgia. It was a
Mm,
hard year to get into Tennessee in a lot of ways, and UNC was a hard year. UVA was a
mhm,
hard year. So people that were coming from these states, like if you're in Atlanta or in Charlotte, it was harder to get into your state school because of the county
right.
representation, right? So I think there was in that year there was a lot of the thought of like where are you gonna go? One thing that was driven to me, which is my grandfather saying this, he was born in 1924 in the Depression. And what was happening in Atlanta at that point in 2009 was we were having a real estate contraction that
Mhm,
became, our recession, which was
mhm,
really, felt after Wachovia failed and, Bank of America was absorbed by, and that merged with Merrill Lynch. And the economy in Atlanta was not optimistic. And
mm,
there was a lot of thought of like, do you really want to go to one of the Georgia schools or in that
right,
area? Because the network was a little light at the moment and
right,
stressed. So there was a lot of thought of like, well, Texas is doing fantastic. I think the price of oil was kind of the inverse of the stock market at the moment.
right.
But there was this optimism about Dallas and Texas that was really felt in Georgia at the moment where they were like, we kind of have been over levered. We had a lot of home building that is now failing, like the home builder economy in
Yeah,
Atlanta did not do
yeah,
well for the years following the recession. They were heavily financed. So there was a lot of people saying, like, well, how are you going to get a job when you graduate? Since we were kind of the
yeah,
high school class of the recession, you had to graduate in 2010 from SMU. So that must have been even harder for you because then you're in the real world. Whereas I was just going to the university selection
yeah,
during that. And people were like, you need to go somewhere that has a real network, immediate jobs available. Like if you're in
yeah,
Athens, you have to drive a long way to get to Atlanta, it feels
right.
like. So there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits you learn, maybe not in the moment, but seeing SMU is like just so perfectly located. We've been able to piggyback off the Dallas momentum is that we're a college town inside of a great economy and great city. So SMU checked the most important box. It was co-ed. Uh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
had some great advice that Dallas as a whole is going to be a great environment for you to be a part of, and kind of some foresight post graduation that it might be a good place. Um, so you had a couple buddies to join you with, but what was your mindset going into SMU? Was it, hey, I'm just ready to get on a college campus, take all the classes I can take, and kind of see what sticks and what I'm interested in, or did you have hey, my father was an attorney, I'm gonna go be a political science major and go pursue that career, or kind of what was the mentality in those first couple years of college?
Yeah, it was, I was really interested in, like, kind of broad liberal arts and then focusing more on kind of business towards the end, like, maybe do,
Mhm.
like, a history and econ major or something like that.
Yeah.
Dipped my toe into a political science class and actually got pushed out. He was sort of saying, like, "I only want juniors and above," and he was not super into, kind of taking it earlier, and it was like I think it was like a 1301. It
Yeah.
wasn't really it wasn't a second year tiering,
Mhm.
but I think it was
Mhm.
really trying to get, people that are only going to law school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was TBD on law school at the moment. I was really thinking more of a business school track of getting an MBA after a first career option. So, it's sort of that mentality of like, how is this building into a career opportunity? But doing a history major sort of was the best way to take a little bit of language, take a little bit of these electives, and doing an English minor, sort of backfilling some of the writing. Sort of how that came about is the more and more I got into those departments, the more I really enjoyed like Edward Countryman. Orlovsky was a great professor.
Oh,
Haynes and English, like all these professors
yeah.
that were really teaching these interesting courses, but really getting specific into periods of time. Now that we're in like the AI age, I just am so thankful that I had that real writing,
Right.
curriculum and a
Yes.
real press to how to draft, how to be self critical. I think the
Right.
hardest thing coming out of high school is realizing how many drafts you have to do for a
Mm,
college paper to be college worthy, right? Whereas in high school, it's sort of a two draft process. Like you write it once and then you just, get the typos out the second time. Whereas, you really have to like create some original thought, right? If you're doing a thesis paper. So
absolutely.
that was good because now AI, I think, is just lending so much to that you start to create like a little bit of a writing handicap because you just are just taking the language and making it, sort of work in the email or the memo.
Yep. Yep.
Whereas, the original tech, you really have to be able to originally draft in order to like work in these businesses. So that was where I really credit SMU, like sort of gave the options within Dedman and pursuing these different options in Dedman, and everyone who was also in Dedman at the time, I think felt that freedom. Where I will say that the Cox people were very stressed about accounting, getting through those kind of
Right.
filter levels
Yeah. Yeah.
that you sort of need to have if you're doing a BBA and you need to have if you're in a little bit more of a funnel network. Whereas
Mhm.
Edmond is a little bit, I mean, it's a little large. You can sort of borrow some lessons here, take a poetry class, take some certain histories that maybe you weren't as focused
Totally.
on. But I really thought I was doing an MBA afterwards, so I didn't think
Yeah.
that I needed to borrow that much time from doing finance or other
Mm.
things. So
I love it, and I'll have you come back and give the PSA of why those current students should consider either warranted
right.
dead men or like why that matters. But I'd be interested to know, we're gonna get into your career and you've worked at some really top firms, right? And I'd be interested to know how many of your peers that you came up with, worked for, respected, like where did you felt they ranked in their degrees? Were they all finance, business oriented, or did you notice that like, hey, some of the best people you worked with were like you and history majors or had kind of more of a traditional liberal arts background?
I mean, honestly, I was totally I felt like besides going to SMU, I definitely felt like I was out of my league at first. When I was the first
Just
thing I
because
did
of your
out.
major, you felt like, "Hey, I'm not qualified to be here at the Carlyle Group compared to these guys who've been studying
Yeah,
business to this point."
I think, you're 22, 23 years old. The first summer out, I knew that my internship at Carlisle was like still being, kind of like I was going through the last round. So
Mhm,
what I did before that started, which was about Labor Day weekend, so call it September 1st of 2013, I was able to do an internship with Senator Marco Rubio up on Capitol Hill,
mhm,
and work in his Senate office building, which was really an exciting place to be because the summer of 2013 was a huge immigration reform push. There was
mm,
a few things going on with Speaker Boehner that was interesting. It was really in the midst of Obama's second term that were really emblematic of like where Obamacare was going and some of those things. So
mhm,
understanding some of that legislation and folks
yep,
like John McCain were really, at the top of their game and others. So that leadership was really interesting to kind of see how that was going. And sort of we were past the legislation of TARP and the recession. So you're really more seeing kind of what would be laid for the rest of the decade, which is sort of when our careers really came
yeah,
into their own. So that was an interesting place to start because once so as I was networking to try to get this internship at Carlisle, SMU was a huge doorway of contacts and network that really helped me sort of
mhm,
get the some interviews, get a little bit of traction of like the resume getting to the right
yeah,
people, just to kind of get that. So having that SMU connection was really crucial, especially in DC where you weren't sure if you could really get some of those contacts. You felt like you
yeah,
met all these UVA and WNL
right,
and
right,
Georgetown folks, and they had immense contacts. So when you're in a Senate office, you sort of understand all those people that go to these local schools in the Maryland, Virginia area,
right,
like really knew what they wanted to do.
right,
And coming from Dallas, it's like we're sort of enjoying like, the experience of learning about the government, whereas they
Right.
were committed to government service,
Right.
right? So
Right.
that was different. And then when I started at Carlyle in September, as an intern for the first 2 months, and they hired me on as a full-time analyst and ended up being with them for 4.5 years. And I think just being grounded in, the typical person that's on a buyout team or the real estate team at Carlisle are from like, they have very like known source schools. And I
Right.
think as SMU folks, we've got to really think about how do we help, you know, our students, as they're really thinking about their next step,
Yeah.
really like pursue the investment banking analyst internships
Mhm.
during the summers. Because I tell you, when you talk to the people that come from Yale or Georgetown or UVA, from sophomore year on, they are keenly focused on how people matriculate up into banking and
Mm.
then pursue their private equity entry, through the associate programs of how they recruit
Right.
out the investment banking sector groups. So I really felt like, that was something at SMU I thought we did not have a huge kind of lexicon of like how that was
Yeah.
happening and how the pipeline worked. Whereas I mean, I love that we are more relaxed about that. We are more focused on, making relationships,
Right.
doing all those things. Whereas they are like trying to get, a Morgan Stanley internship after the freshman year, so then they can
Right.
work at, and sort of you can see that the roadmap is almost so mapped that they don't really follow kind of a
Yeah.
creative or an
Right.
opportunity. They are just
Right.
focused on like the next brand and the next
Right.
bank, right? So I think
That's
that's
well
where
said.
we have a lot more proclivity, whereas they are much
Mhm.
more focused on like kind of that ramp up.
Right.
But yeah, it's intimidating. I mean, you meet these people and it's like they are all, at one of these schools that's a target school, that
Right.
Wall Street has kind of declared. They have been at Goldman Sachs. They're now at Carlyle doing their associate degree, and they're all trying to get a letter to Wharton or
Right. Right.
HBS or Darden or something. And you're like, wow, I don't know if I really fit into that. And then you
Right.
realize that none of that matters. Like you're all working on the same team. You're going to
Yeah.
perform. You're going to put in the hours. And, we were working like when I was an intern, I was doing 110 hours a week for 4 months because they had me on hourly pay. So I actually had to track in a timesheet.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was, great that I got overtime. But then the best advice I got from SMU person is be so costly to them that they have to take you on full time, and that's what I did, right?
Mm.
I worked
Yeah.
as long as they let me and as long as they gave me projects, and that sort of worked, and was in their DC office for 2 years before going to New York for the other 2 years I was with them.
And so let's touch a little bit more on that experience at Carlisle, right? You're kinda coming to that a little maybe green or thinking maybe I don't have the same background as some of my coworkers, but once you get in there realizing that you are capable, did SMU prepare you enough? And then also, how did that history major and some of the other ways you studied maybe work out to your advantage compared to your peers that allowed you to kind of gain some confidence or excel in other ways that maybe they didn't?
Yeah, I mean, we were writing a lot of long form documents that were kind of tedious, but they were telling a story, right? Like a PPM, private placement
Yeah.
memorandum, investor presentations. It really is just taking like, this investment thesis of a portfolio company. Like we were working on Montclair jackets at the time,
Mhm.
the Apple by Beats deal. You're really just communicating that forward and just understanding, the basics of like, your EBITDA multiple, all those things, your IRRs, all those. But then, just putting it within the canvas of how to draft and everything. I didn't think that you needed to have an immense background in some of these that I thought was sort of a perceived barrier, but not one that, if you put in enough weekend hours, you can kind of get around it. And now that, the more resourceful you get, which I think is the biggest lesson they told me is like stop asking questions. Like
Yeah.
you need to research for like an hour before asking a question on it, which was basically like you have to be a little more resourceful with what you have.
Mhm.
I think that's a little bit of tough love, but on the other hand, that kind of is how you coach someone up. You can't ask 3 questions if you hadn't like really thought about each of one of them
Yeah.
because you really eliminated them. So that was something that was a self discipline that you really have to focus on. And one I think with, whether it be AI resources or others, like if you know how to use them the right way, it kind of helps you get through a learning curve. It doesn't take
Totally.
it's not a shortcut.
So you put in the time 5 years at Carlisle Group, you probably have built up an immense amount of expertise and confidence in yourself that you could continue to pursue a career in this kind of investment world lane. What ultimately led you to kind of decide, all right, I want to try and change, kind of shift more into a real estate focused kind of career with JLL and ultimately Greystar?
Worked on our corporate buyout funds at Carlyle and sort of was looking around at like where was the growth that was sort of
Mhm.
moving into the southeast. A lot of the portfolio companies that we were buying that were kind of like the large mega cap were a lot
Mhm.
were in Texas. Maybe they were in like some of the other large hubs like Atlanta and Charlotte. But as I was looking a little bit further afield and kind of what was the growing market opportunity in the southeast to kind of bring me a little bit closer to home, as you start to think about marriage and family planning and being closer to family and something that I really wanted to be more important
Mhm.
because you're in Manhattan, really not a lot of family around. You have all these great SMU people that are from Connecticut originally and some of those northern boarding schools or northern schools
Mhm.
that help you out, but you sort of understand where you are and where you want to be by the time you're say 30 or 35. So as I was playing through that, there was a growing private equity firm focused on real estate and specifically the rental housing sector in Charleston, which was
Mhm.
Greystar.
Mhm.
So joined them in 2019, which is also the year I got married. My wife, Kimbrell, who was Kimbrell Hughes at SMU, and her sister Brooke Hughes were from Greenville. So we were excited to be back in the Carolinas and all my family in
Yep.
Georgia. So an opportunity in Charleston came up that sort of was sort of faster than the timeline that I had planned. In terms of, I thought it might take 6 months. It only took like 2.5 months. So it was like such an awesome thing to have that opportunity come up. So have been at Greystar for the last 7 years until this spring, and learned so much through every way of like how they operate their real estate. They're the largest property manager of apartments in the US, one of the largest developers of apartments. They are a well-oiled, very thorough machine that takes all the learnings of Trammell Crow Company and have built that out, mapped from their founders' design to create, the market leader in rental housing, right? Student housing, active adult. So that was a great place to really come in where you're more of a generalist, understand the private equity structure, understand
Yeah.
some of those things about finance, but then really coming into an asset class and into a real, subsector and trying to create context there, try to, really understand what attracts money, what delivers returns, which markets are demonstrative. And the more I was there, the more I was like, I'm really excited about the Southeast, which is great because I'm from here.
Yeah.
My network's here and my family. So that was one where more and more I was more attracted to doing that. So after covering some of the international markets more at Greystar and, doing a lot of fundraising for Asia Pacific and some of those
Mhm.
things that we had built there on the value add side and seeing the value add series that Greystar had created in each region of the US, Europe, and Asia, I was like, I'm really excited now to spend more time locally. While at Greystar, we're married. We have 3 children now, which has been amazing. But 3 children mean that you you have to spend a little more time closer. And the amount of international travel I was doing was a lot.
Really?
At Greystar, I was doing about 2 to 3 weeks a year of being in a broad kind of travel setting. So like 2 weeks in Australia or a week in Korea or something like that.
Oh my
And that
gosh.
was that was getting a little hard with 3 children under 4 years old,
Yeah.
and really helping support them the best way I could. That I was sort of waiting and tentatively thinking of when was the time to sort of pursue a market opportunity and take an older family business and reposition this to create what I wanted to be as a new
Yeah.
investment platform. So
Yeah.
that's where I am today, and that's where I've really been focused the last few weeks.
I love this. As we kind of get into this thesis you have and what you're building and how we can rally around that and support you from an SME network, I'd love to hear kind of in your 7 years at Greystar, where you wear a lot of hats. I'm sure you're moving up the company rapidly. You mentioned obviously the immense amount of trust they have in you and reliance on you to be traveling internationally to represent the company. What maybe what's one story or one scenario, one deal, where you felt like I fell in love with real estate. I know this is an asset class that's going to be something I pursue for the rest of my career. and where you knew, "Hey, I'm pretty good at this. I think I know what I'm doing here," and kinda solidified your confidence in the space that maybe now looking back on it as I asked that question, kinda gave you that initial idea of, "Hey, I can do this on for my own one day."
The first week I joined Greystar in 2019, and the way I like was connected with Greystar was through a SMU connection, which was a nice introduction and one of those things where it sort of helps you sort of like have a good first interview and all those things. But so the hiring manager was comfortable asking me a question, and she's like, "Would you mind checking your passport and making sure you have about 6 months validity?" And
Mhm,
I was like, "I guess I-9 documents you have to show your passport on the first day, like, or a federal
mhm, mhm.
ID." But really, what she was inferring, I started on Tuesday after Memorial Day, and I flew to Sydney, Australia on Sunday.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't have a business card. I didn't have a corporate card. And I was accruing all these expenses to fly down there, hotel, all those things. And we were pursuing two large student housing portfolios
Mhm.
in Australia that
Wow.
were over 1,000 beds apiece, student housing. And we were trying to do, through an M&A channel, really create scale and establish a platform there. So we started to observe the market by participating in these to sort of understand cap rates, understand
Mm,
like kind of what is the right one. So we sort of followed that deal to sort of understand all those trends of the market as we had just recruited a team there. But, that was business building. That was like we had 3 people in a WeWork office, and now we have, a few thousand beds. We have about 7,000 beds under management in Australia. We have about 50 to 60 employees were based there by the time. So we went from 3 to, over 60, including the property management folks. Really large, well-scaled assets that we helped raise money for. But I think doing that and being one of the only Americans that was wholly focused on helping do some of these things on a foreign market, we're really creating a new business. And you don't have all the overlay of kind of the firm helping you. They're definitely helping you build it, but like day to day, they're expecting you to execute and like follow the business plan. And I think that really, from the beginning, I was like, man, without a business card or even like a corporate,
yeah.
way to like get reimbursed, like I hope I get reimbursed, um, before I can even, like, be assured of that, they're entrusting me to try to, like, help attract
Right.
money for this opportunity if it feel like it underwrites, help underwrite it, help, really, vet out the market opportunity because this might not be the portfolio, but we are trying to really grow into the sector. And, 7 years later, we were there, right?
That's
Same
super
thing
exciting.
in Japan, same thing in some of these other markets in the US. So as we were building businesses, when I joined Greystar, we were 33 billion of AUM, and when I left, we were about 79 billion. So we'd over doubled in AUM. And that was through creating these exciting new operating platforms, creating a business, being with a team and seeing them grow through their business planning into executing and realizing deals. So that was really a place where it was coming into like being truly the market leader and established in so many different verticals that I was, felt like that was all the training I would need to take in a family business setting in a more localized market where my local contacts were connected in a way that was sort of symbiotic with a large firm being a peer and, coming into a more of a lower middle market setting where I felt like there was really not only that mentorship provided, but also you felt like there was the confidence that a firm had really, given you to pursue it.
No, incredible story. Thanks for sharing that. You shared a little bit about your international travel, but you got the 3 kids, right? So we know those days are behind you. Um,
Yeah.
and what I love about the SMU community and the SMU alumni, they're risk takers, they're leaders of their professions. Um, you know, Tell us about the Woodson Company, maybe from when you formed it, kind of the process of ultimately leaving Greystar and knowing you're gonna pursue this full time, and then a little bit about your guys' strategy and what we can expect to hear from you guys in the coming years.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, I've really, one thing that I've seen in kind of like just below the institutional level of apartments, and one where I sort of had this a little bit of a legacy business to see where, we have some old real estate that's kind of post-industrial, like let's find some opportunities, maybe 1031, like let's build a new operating platform and like think fresh, right? So my
Mhm.
experience is like, we need to look for a cash flowing business and create some revenue. And that was the number one objective that I saw is like, this is how we need to sort of create what I wanted to set out. What I had been waiting for since 2022 when we had 11 interest rate hikes was there's going to be an opportunity for the lower, sort of the shorter tenured, newer players in real estate that come in during COVID to buy,
Mhm.
their first fund or their first series of deals, many of which, took on a lot of leverage, right? So I think there's just a opportunity now that we're 5 years on from 2021, which was the largest year in transaction volume for multifamily, that a lot of folks now are looking around trying to, understand how they can reposition their portfolio of apartments. And I'm trying to, approach them to help delever some of these really quality cash flowing assets with, by just applying less, loan to value
Mhm.
and giving these different types of apartments in these different markets an opportunity to, kind of create a new IRR horizon, but also help these folks kind of come out at a sufficient cap rate given how tough the market's been on them, right? Like, I mean, nobody would have seen how interest rates have gone up, but I think there are a lot of people that have come into this space over the last 6 or 7 years that really, they bought, sort of long duration assets and put short duration debt on them. And unfortunately, the real estate cycle and the interest rate curve has moved against them, right? And I think in those opportunities where you now have more of a buyer's market, that was one where I was like, if interest rates stay at this sustained level, north of 5% on the 10 year, you start to see that spread of where cap rates will have to react and that kind of volume will react. So what we're seeing in in these markets locally in the Carolinas is, a lot of deals are now, there's a ton of new supply that's been delivered here, especially in the
Mhm.
class A segment. So in that like B plus, A minus quality deals that are more suburban, they are now, having a lot of concessions offers. They're seeing a lot of retracing in the rent levels. All those things have kind of come to a crossroads to where we see that as a good opportunity to take, very good assets that deserve a fair price, but ones where they just naturally need to deleverage with the next buyer. They can't, refinance at the same leverage level. It's just too costly now. So that's sort of where we're pursuing this market opportunity, and one where we're focused on building a portfolio around that theme and just looking for value add opportunities in that subset of deals. Sort of under 200 units in the Carolinas and some of the submarkets of around Atlanta.
Yeah. And I know we talked before, we got some exciting things building and opportunities that we're gonna keep continuing to get in front of our 1911 group. And but as we kind of wrap up here, outside of what we'll continue to talk about and get you in front of and have you again present to our group when you're in Dallas, what other ways can the SMU community, the 1911 group, support you going forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, when you're in these great large organizations, you get really focused on, trying to like learn the group, learn the team, execute well. I think when you come out and you're in a smaller, firm setting, you really realize you need to like, really reach out to your network and really reconnect with people, whether they were your year or you just missed them or just after you. So, whether it's like legal, insurance, any of those things that kind of touch a multifamily asset and, managing a portfolio in a private equity setting, I'm looking forward to just meeting and rekindling a lot of these connections and, just seeing if like how I can help people that maybe do business over here, spending more time in Texas, where we have, kind of that cross of capital and, resources and people that are providing services in these different areas, helping them, find more here. I'm looking forward to just helping people out with those connections.
Well, I know the rest of the community is excited to help you as well. Bruce, thank you so much for the time today. And we're excited to watch what you build with the Woodson Company and the rest of your future and getting you in front of the rest of the Dallas group soon.
Well, thank you so much, Mitch. I appreciate, you hosting us and creating all these different events for us to really, create these connections and friendships. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for the kind words. See you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you to our sponsors, Sewell Buick GMC, Agility Holdings Group, Probity Advisors, Sound of a Rose, Hilltop Property Tax, Security National Bank of Texas, Boyd, Shackelford, Barnett, and Dixon, Bigham Agency, Life After Ball, SMU Cox School of Business, and Mignon Steakhouse.